Are we all set? Mic check. Okay. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. All protocols observed. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Michaela Cameron, and I'd like to welcome you to today's panel, Building an HSE Culture in Guyana, International Standards and Regulations. In order to provide further insight into the roles health, safety, and the environment play in the oil and gas industry, today's conversation is centered around the theme, Building a Robust Safety Culture. Our objective today is to clearly define how local and international companies can work to improve their HSE standards while being cognizant of the sector's demanding and fast-paced nature. Sure, oil and gas companies are following stringent procedures and standards so as to minimize risk and avoid any potential accidents while also engaging a company's employees and a country's stakeholders. All right, on that note, let's get today's discussion started with our various panelists who are not only experts in their respective fields, but are also equipped with the knowledge to fuel today's discussion. So this is in no particular order. Please allow me to introduce Ms. Lavanya Springer. Ms. Springer is the HSE Manager at the Center for Local Business Development. Her experience spans various industries, including mining and logistics, heavy-duty equipment, and oil and gas. She works with local companies to assist them in entering the oil and gas value chain through improved standards by training and mentoring these companies in health, safety, security, and environment, of course, HSSE. Good afternoon, Lavanya. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon, Michaela.
Are you guys hearing Lavanya? Nope.
Mic check.
Better?
Better? Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Lavanya. All right, next up, we have Mr. Ernesto Quadros, who is the Managing Director of Schlumberger Caribbean. Mr. Quadros has more than 23 years of experience in the sector in oil and gas operations, sales and marketing, leadership and management, organizational transformation, and process improvement. He has been employed at Schlumberger for the past 18 years, and as managing director, he is responsible for the strategic position of the company in the region. Hola, Ernesto, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien.
Okay, are you guys hearing Ernesto? Okay, great. Moving on to Mr. Sham Nokta, who is the Managing Director of Environmental Management Consultants, also known as EMC, a leading environmental services company here in Guyana. He's also chair of the Energy Committee of the American Chamber of Commerce and chair of the Local Content Advisory Committee of the Private Sector Commission. Mr. Nokta is a key member of the private sector, a former president of the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association, and he has been involved in key initiatives including local content, yes, local content, Guyana's low carbon development strategy, and various conservation and environmental initiatives. Hello, Sham, how you doing?
Hi, Michaela. Good evening, everyone.
You guys are hearing Sham? All right, perfect. Moving along to Mr. Paul MacDonald, who is the HSE manager for Stena Drilling Limited. He leads the team and oversees all medical aspects at Stena Drilling and has comprehensive knowledge of emergency response, management systems, and audits. Mr. MacDonald's career in the oil and gas industry started more than 30 years ago when he took his first job offshore as a medic. In 2007, Mr. MacDonald moved on to an onshore role with Stena as a safety advisor and was subsequently promoted to HSE manager in 2013. Did I get all of that correct?
You're making me sound very old, Michaela.
Good afternoon. All right. And then last but not least, we have Mr. Kemraj Parasram, who is the executive director of the Environmental Protection Agency. Mr. Parasram is qualified and experienced in the field of environmental natural resources management, law, policy, and governance in the wider Caribbean. He also possesses technical knowledge and experience in coastal and marine resources management and governance, biodiversity management and conservation, protected areas planning and management, and environmental law and regulatory compliance and enforcement. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Thank you, Michaela, and good afternoon and good evening to all my distinguished panelists as well as delegates. Good afternoon.
All right. Okay. So as you guys may have realized, we have quite the stellar lineup today. And without any further ado, let's jump right into the first question, which will help to fuel the discussion based around today's theme, building a robust safety culture. So I'd like to get started with a question that deals with HSE guidelines. So this question, each company's HSE guidelines are dictated by internal policies. How can these policies be effectively communicated, across the board so that all of the relevant stakeholders are on the same wavelength? So Lavanya, let's get started with you. You are the QHSSC manager at the Center for Local Business Development. I'm sure you can add to this conversation.
Definitely. Are you hearing me, guys? Okay, great. Thanks, Michaela. That's a great question and suitable because of the fact that at the Center for Local Business Development, we preach that like any other tenet of business, HSE must be a part of a company's culture. It has to start with leadership, but also be embodied by all employees and other stakeholders to that company. And in order for that to happen, HSE must be communicated effectively. Through the center's HSSE Management System Mentorship Program, we speak to companies through our awareness seminars and one-on-one meetings with them and express to them that they can use not only generic means of communicating, however, they can also use those that must be tailored to their specific business. There are those such as training seminars, induction, communicating using the eyes, visual. Signage is so important in safety. It communicates what others can miss during a training session. And of course, there are other means of communication that can be internal to the organization and electronic means. But we at the center believe that through our programs, we're able to reach local Guyanese companies and help them to tailor their communication methods to meet their business needs.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Lavanya. And Ernesto, I want to go to you because you have 23 years of experience in the industry. How can you add to this conversation, to this particular topic?
So the way I see it is you have two different things on that question. For me, one is the communication of policies and standards. They are very specific to each company. And then you have the other one, which is the training on HSE and how those trainings are passed into their employees or contractors that are working for that specific company. On the policies and the standards, I think they're very specific to that company, and we will have to basically pass those messages when those people start working for us, either as an employee or as a contractor. The training part is mostly for the force that is going to work with these companies. But I think on that sense, we can have a better use, for example, here in Guyana, of the center, okay? So we can validate that some of those specific trainings, call it use of PPE and some of those very specific ones that we can use on every single company, we can validate the use of that training to be accepted by many of the companies that are working here in Guyana. I think that is something that we definitely need to start working as an oil and gas organization in Guyana.
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you. In the policies and standards, for example, in Schlumberger, what we have is what we call NEST, which is the new employee system training. And what we do is every time that we're going to have a new employee or a new contractor that is going to work on any of our facilities, they need to have to go through this induction. It can go from 2 days or to a week if it is a full new employee. So that is what we do in our company to highlight the importance and the relevant trainings that we need to give them and the policies and the standards. But I definitely think at the end, we need to work closer to the center. It could be other way, but I think the center today is doing such an amazing job on training not only on HSE, but also on quality management system and HSE management system, that we need to start using that. It's already a great start. So why to reinvent the wheel when there is something that is working already in the country?
All right, thank you so much for that. That was some great information that both of you shared. Of course, we're going to move on to our next question. So it's essential for us to discuss the importance of having emergency practices in place. It is, after all, the oil and gas industry. On that note, oil and gas companies are required to develop and maintain contingency procedures in order to minimize risk from any potential accidents. Do you believe more can be done here in Guyana and within the industry? I know we're going to start with you, Paul, that you have comprehensive knowledge of emergency response. So how would you answer this particular question?
Well, we have 2 drill ships working in Guyana at this point in time. We also have 2 working elsewhere. Now, drilling is potentially a very hazardous activity, and it's therefore essential that we ensure that all the contingencies are exercised on a regular basis. So we have to train the personnel first and foremost. We have to induct them, make sure they're confident and able to react to anything. And then that continues on a weekly basis or a daily basis to ensure that they're actually practicing this. Now, we might have firefighting exercises, we may have trip drill exercises, we have any number of exercises that allow personnel on the rig to go in increasing confidence and react to any emergency that is dealt with, that they are presented with.
Okay, thank you for that. And we want to hear from Kemraj, who of course is the executive director of the EPA. We want to know what are your thoughts on this particular question.
Thank you, Michaela. And I'm probably the thorn in these guys' side. It would be remiss of me if you permit me to say a little bit about the EPA. The EPA is the lead environmental regulator in Guyana, guided by the Environmental Protection Act and the associated regulations, as well as, of course, international and regional best practices and backed by good science. Now, HSE, you would notice that the E is at the farthest end of this thing. And you probably listening to the previous speakers, the environment did not come forward as being optimum. And even just now, forgive me, guys, but the environment is as important as health and safety. And we need to ensure that we pay the same attention to it. Now, if I'm to go on and talk about what the EPA expects of companies and HSE, I'll probably take the entire week here. You can ask EEPGL what their permit size looks like. It's like about 50 pages of our expectations of them and obligations. But I want to focus on one thing. It's emergency response and contingency plan. And where the offshore oil and gas is concerned is their oil spill response plan. Now, importantly, I know many of these companies existed for years and globally operating, and they have good HSE policies. The key thing is transferring that to the Guyanese context. Guyana is a different, it's an emerging country in the oil and gas sector, but we need to place what happens elsewhere in the local context. And that needs to be paid attention to. So to answer your question, yes, more can be done. Now, we have all these, and one of our requirements is to ensure, and as part of our permitting process, is the requirement for these emergency response and contingency plans. And they're fancy documents sometimes, for the regulatory process to be completed. This is done, this document is prepared, but it's sometimes left after that on somebody's shelf or in somebody's office. It's important that stakeholders, operators, and the new entrants into the sector, when they prepare their plans, they must ensure that it is constantly updated. They must invest in training, invest in significant training, invest in I mean, everything is perhaps kept within the asset or the facility. It's important that investments be done outside to involve other stakeholders, involve government, involve the NGOs, involve the other private sector, and we're talking about local content all morning. But those are the key elements that needs to be improved upon, and so that we can take this HSE and the environment in particular forward in Guyana. Thank you.
Thank you, Kemraj. Okay, so let's move on to discussing the HSE aspect of a company's operations. This question, the Guyanese oil and gas industry is in its nascent stage. How can companies conduct or support research towards the improvement of health, safety, and environmental aspects of their operations? So we're going to start with you, Sham, because I know that you have experience developing conservation and environmental initiatives. I think that this is actually the perfect question for you. So what are your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Michaela. So first of all, every project, whether it's oil and gas or any other sector for that matter, before you embark on a project, it's important to understand the environment that you will be operating in, the local conditions. Oil and gas primarily will be in the marine environment. And over the years in Guyana, there's been a paucity of information on the marine environment. This has started to change, with more and more activities, but there is clearly an opportunity to scale this up, scale up research and data collection. First of all, at the project level, so that this can support project planning and development. But then also, when you look at the marine environment from a much wider perspective, when we're looking at optimizing resource utilization, looking at conservation and sound environmental management. So data and information is very critical for all of this. There is an opportunity, and we heard quite a bit about local content yesterday and today, but I believe there is an opportunity to maximize that local content opportunity through research by utilizing local experts, tapping into local knowledge, whether it's at the community level, working with local NGOs, and I see Ms. Arjun right up in front here from the Guyana Marine Conservation Society, local universities, private sector organizations who've been doing this sort of work, and also government agencies. But it's not only looking at national level institutions, organizations, but also to establishing linkages, because there are many centers, there's expertise regionally that have done good work in this space as well. So research can play a very critical part. In fact, it's a necessary part in everything that we are going to be doing in the marine environment. But critically is to channel that research to ensure that it's coordinated and that we maximize the value from the information that's collected.
All right, thank you so much, Sham. But Ernesto, I want to hear from you, in terms of your position at Schlumberger. You have tons of experience in process improvement, and just Sham spoke about, data collection and research. How would you respond to this question based upon that?
For me, I'll answer that question straight with one word: is leadership. Okay. Yes, we're in a nascent country with oil and gas, and the industry is starting. But I think we're in the perfect spot right now to implement the right leadership. Okay, to implement the right level or culture of HSE. Okay, for us in a Schlumberger, for example, we put our people as the priority of everything, and that's the way it should be. It's our main asset in the company is our people, and they should be safe. They always should be safe. The only way that we can transfer this culture of HSE is by leadership. Is everyone that get transferred here from outside, they already probably have that culture, but we need to put that culture into the new organization that we are putting here in Guyana. Today, we have 152 employees, Guyanese employees, working directly for us. And I'm so proud that in the last 2 years, we have had 0 incidents. And that is telling us that there is this eagerness from the young and growing oil and gas industry of absorbing a culture of safety. That is what is demonstrating me this. But as well is the leadership that the company is putting people up front and the safety of their people up front. So for me, it's leadership. And that is the only way that we're going to have a very safe on HSE, and that is only health, but it's health. It's health,
Safety.
Environment, and safety. Okay. So that's it. It's
right.
leadership.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the next question is going to deal with the private sector and the government. So how can companies in the private sector work with the government in order to improve regulations and industry standards which can relate to health, safety, and environmental matters? So let's start with you, Lavanya. I know that you work with local companies by training and mentoring them in HSSE. What are your thoughts on this question? How would you respond to this?
I would say that, as you rightly said, the center does work with local companies, and we train and mentor in HSSE. A part of that is ensuring that we educate them on local legal requirements, and we do this through our HSSE management system awareness class, as well as throughout the mentorship program. So what we do is whatever legal requirement exists currently, we ensure that businesses are well informed of that. And we work with them to ensure at a very minimum, they comply with those requirements. And that's the basis for working together with regulators to ensure that you improve whether it's standards or regulations in the industry.
Okay, thank you. And Sham, moving on to you, I know that you are a key member of the private sector and you've worked with the government on a myriad of projects. What is your response to this question?
So oil and gas is a relatively new sector to Guyana. So certainly there is a need for us to review the legislative framework, also to look at standards. And this is a process that should be led by government, but also a process that should provide space for contribution, for inputs from a variety of stakeholders, private sector, yes, but also other organizations, research organizations, academia, NGOs. Because essentially what we need to see is a marrying of two things: international best practice, and we've heard this, I believe, yesterday morning, bringing the highest level of knowledge, practice from other experiences, other countries to Guyana, but at the same time ensuring that we recognize the national context, the national conditions. Sometimes that doesn't always happen. And what we have to be mindful of is putting a framework in place that's fit for purpose, that can functionally operate in our conditions, but at the same time meet the high level of standards that we're working to attain.
Okay, great. And of course, we have to hear from the head of the EPA on this particular question. Kamraj, any thoughts you'd like to share with us today on this?
Sure. Thanks, Michaela, again. Now, I mean, okay, the EPA is the regulator. Now, our approach is a mix of objective and prescriptive regulation. So we're not solely prescriptive. Prescriptive meaning you're going and you're saying, do this, do that. Our approach is for both the objectives, so we give the opportunity to the operators to also advise us or bring solutions to us, to bring standards to us, maybe from elsewhere, to see how they can fit in the Guyanese context. Our approach with that mix is one of partnership, collaboration, and the premise of trust. So whilst, as Sham and the others said, that the oil and gas sector is pretty new, the EPA has been in existence for some 26 years, heavily focused on the mining and forestry sector. And of course, the oil and gas sector is pretty new to us. We have a cadre of trained professionals, and we're building upon that. And yes, we have the knowledge, but we want to work in partnership and collaboration with the sector so that we can together develop appropriate standards and of course inform regulations and other legislative framework that we can build and ensure that the sector is adequately regulated, right? So that is our general approach. One of the things we require is, for example, our environmental assessment and management plans, or our environmental social impact assessment. I don't want our partners or operators feel as if we are putting unnecessary burden on them. But from that process, from these processes, we can come up with appropriate standards that will ensure all these beautiful things, the success of production, the success of building our economy, but ensuring that health, safety, and the environment are utmost in all our parts.
Okay, thank you for that. And Paul, let's move on to a question about the employees in the industry and how their needs are being met. So are the relevant stakeholders in the oil and gas industry recognizing the concerns of the employees within the sector? And are they being provided with all the relevant information as it relates to company policies and practices?
I really hope so, actually, Michaela, because it's essential when somebody goes offshore for the first time that they are given the chance to be educated, given the chance to learn the policies and become really useful members of the team. Now we've got, I know everybody's got exact numbers. I don't have exact numbers. It's more than 100 guys, that are working for us. We found them inquisitive, they're enthusiastic. They've taken on board all of the education we've given them, and they are progressing very well. But it's our job to make sure that, like Eduardo says, health and safety is massively important. The environment, I agree, and Kemraj has said that it is at the end. Standard drilling has got the ISO 14001 standard, not because it's mandated, but it is important. It's important that we make a commitment and we say that these things are meaningful to us and we will follow through on all these requirements. The guys that we've are working with us, they are trained very systematically to make sure that every policy, every procedure, every risk assessment is known before they start a job. The industry has moved. We are a mature industry now, and Guyana is maybe coming in at the right time, because 31 years ago when I started, there was a lot more incidents, a lot more accidents. There was more spills, Kemraj, like you say. But we have moved on, but we're still not perfect. Maybe the Guyanese will take us to the next level. I really hope so, because...
I hope so too.
I know. Yeah, I think they will. They've got some real talent out there, and we aim to take full advantage of it, and keep them for the long term.
Okay, excellent. And Sham, I just want to know your thoughts on this particular question. Is there anything that you can add to the conversation that Paul just spoke about in terms of keeping the employees up to date on the company's policies and practices from an environmental perspective, of course?
Yeah, I think a lot of this also is about leadership. And
as Ernesto mentioned.
Yes, and from our experience with the Center for Local Business and working with many different businesses, sometimes these issues tend to be delegated at a lower level. And really, when you have leadership from the top that's involved, you find that you get great attraction among staff. But more importantly, it demonstrates that these issues transcend whichever level you work in an organization. And that makes a big difference in changing the culture.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that's going to conclude today's discussion. I think we're out of time for the Q&A segment, just checking with our organizers. Yes, okay. All right, well, thank you to the members of the panel for sharing their thoughts and on this very important topic. As the oil and gas industry continues to rapidly expand here in Guyana, it's essential we remain mindful of the industry's guidelines while also recognizing the importance of a country's stakeholder and, of course, its environment. Thank you again, everyone. Do enjoy the rest of your afternoon and, of course, the rest of the conference. Thank you very much for attending today.